Good morning and welcome to the Institute for Spiritual Development in Oneonta, New York. And you have joined us halfway through our Metaphysical Sunday service. And we have this morning a lovely homily presented by Reverend Renee Ranke. And Renee will have you switch the spotlight over to yourself. Thank you, Renee.
Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? So, in the wee hours of the morning today, we set our clocks back and ended daylight saving time. So now we're entering that time of the year where the days are shorter and the darkness appears to be visible for longer periods. Appears to be visible for longer periods. Yes, there's naturally less daylight this time of year, but the big impact really was from us changing our clocks. So now the darkness appears to end earlier in the morning and start earlier in the evening. But really, it's happening at the same time as it always does this time of year. Now, last Saturday, Diana was talking about the shift fair. Last Saturday, I left the shift fair to do readings at a bar near my house. Now, in another lifetime, many moons ago, I was a bartender for about a decade. And I don't really remember having many spiritual conversations during that period of my life. So I honestly figured that this was going to be an easy gig. Most of the people would be a little tipsy and would be looking for superficial messages about when they would find love or how they could get more money. And you know what? The landscape had changed. This was not the bar scene that I remember. I was shocked by how spiritual the people who came to me were. They talked about being in transition. Sounds familiar? And asked whether or not they were going in the right direction with their lives. The last person I did a reading for that night was a man around my age. And I ended up in a metaphysical conversation with him, which really shocked me. And one of the things that he said to me was that people seem to be self centered, angry, and fearful right now. I kind of laughed when he said it. And I told him that I've been encountering more and more people who seem to be on this path of enlightenment, who seem to understand that there's more to this world than meets the eye. And many of them also seemed overwhelmed by the negativity they were seeing around them, the darkness. And then I told him that maybe he just wasn't looking from the right perspective. Because if in my regular day to day travels I'm seeing more and more people who are stepping onto a spiritual and enlightened path, then that means that more and more light workers are coming forward. And maybe this is just something that's not always visible from the news or on social media. Maybe then what we're experiencing right now in the world is a lot like the end of daylight saving time. The day is still the same number of hours. Someone just had us rearrange it so that what we notice most is the darkness. And what do we do when darkness falls? We turn on the light, right? I mentioned that more and more light workers seem to be coming forward. And we use that term light worker a lot in this metaphysical world. What does it really mean? So today I want to share the words of some others with you. I've two readings to share that I found that I think are pretty awesome. And then a little later on, I have a third excerpt that I'm going to give you too. So the first reading I've got is called In the Pronaos of the Temple of Wisdom by Franz Hartmann. And it was written in 1890. And he says, the nature of alchemy is clearly explained by Johannes Tritham, who says, God is an essential and hidden fire in all things, and especially in man. That fire generates all things. It has generated them and will generate them in the future. And that which is generated is the true divine light in all eternity. God is a fire, but no fire can burn and no light appear within nature without the addition of air to cause the combustion. And likewise, the Holy Spirit in you must act as a divine air or breath, coming out of the divine fire and breathing upon the fire within the soul, so that the light will appear. For the light must be nourished by the fire, and this light is love and gladness and joy within the eternal deity. This light is Jesus, having emanated from the eternity from Jehovah. He who has this light not within himself is in the fire without light. But if the light is in him, then is the Christ in him, and takes form in him, and such a person will know that light as it exists in nature. All things such as we see are in their interior fire and light, wherein is hidden the essence of spirit. All things are a trinity of fire, light, and air. In other words, spirit. The Father is a divine superessential light, the Son, the light having become manifest, the Holy Spirit, a divine superessential air and motion. The fire resides within the heart and sends its rays through the whole body of man, causing it to live. Now, my second reading is a little more recent. It's from Quantum Metaphysics, and it's from Awaken in the Dream with Paul Levy. What is reflected in the magic mirror of physics can precipitate a Copernican shift in how we conceive ourselves in relation to the universe. For example, imagine bathing in the sun's rays on a hot summer day. It is a scientifically accepted fact that the sun is out there, 93 million miles away from Earth. And yet the rays of the sun are the unmediated expression of the sun, which is to say that the rays of the sun are indivisible and not separate from the sun by one iota. This realization instantaneously helps us to change our perspective and understand that the sun isn't outside of us, but rather as we are enveloped in its rays and awash in its life-giving warmth, we are inside of the sun. Not only do we find ourselves within the sun, we further realize that we are not separate from the sun. This is to simultaneously realize that it makes just as much sense to think that the sun is inside of us, which is an expression of our identity expanding to ever larger degrees. It's not that the sun and ourselves are two different entities momentarily sharing the same space, but rather we are the sun. We are the light. In an instant, we go from thinking we are far away from the sun to feeling our oneness with it. Notice what has happened. Once we have this shift in perspective, we can no longer think of the sun as an object outside of ourselves. Not just our image of the sun and our relationship to its image have changed, but in addition, our image and experience of ourselves relative to the universe have changed as well. In the physical world, nothing has actually changed except our mind's perspective. We have simply recognized something we didn't recognize before. After our shift in perspective, the age-old idea that we are composed of light, that we are stardust, makes more sense. Our essential being isn't simply made of light, it is light. The calcium in our bones and iron in our blood are literally forged in the stars. Interestingly, seeing and being in and of the light is a perennial Gnostic theme. The Nag Hammadi Gospel of Thomas, to use one of many examples, refers to a Gnostic, one who knows, as one who both sees and is in the light. The Gnostic Christ is described as the light which is in the light. A true Gnostic is considered to be a light to this world, one who sheds light on the darkness so as to dispel it. So, two readings, one from the late 1800s and one more recent talking about quantum physics. And I think they're pretty amazing. Basically, both of the readings are telling us that we are light and we are divine, that our light and our divinity is a part of who we are from an intrinsic level. But then what is a light worker? Well, that's someone who follows the alchemic guidance in our first reading, someone who recognizes the divine flame within them, that divinity, and allows the breath of spirit to fan the flames and feed that inner light instead of allowing it to be stifled. So, Diana just did a guided meditation, and those of you who've taken development circles with me know that almost all the time when I'm guiding meditations, I start out with a visualization of a light, just like Diana gave us a light, right? I start out with a visualization of a light above the head so that we can open to it and feel it flow through us. Now, I had someone that I was mentoring, and I believe she's here today, say to me once, I don't feel like I have to visualize that light. It's already a part of me. And she would be right. We're not necessarily calling that light in from somewhere outside of ourselves. What we're doing is using our imaginations to activate a light that's already there, already a part of who we are. We're acknowledging it and feeding the flames to increase its strength. But if we're using our imagination, well, does that make the whole thing imaginary? And I said I was going to share one other reading with you. I found a more scientific article from Dr. Joe Dispenza, written in 2015, and it's called Biophotons, the Light in Our Cells. And it speaks to a light language that the cells of all living beings use to communicate. Light language. Another familiar spiritual term to us metaphysicians, right? Dr. Dispenza says that these biophotons, or cellular photoemissions that are sent from our cells, are highly coherent energy that may be responsible for the operation of our biological systems. He also says in this article, in a recent study, 8 volunteers were placed in a darkened room and asked to visualize a bright light, like in our meditations. The participants were monitored with light detectors that picked up an aura of light particles coming from the right side of their brains. In a sense, they were enhancing light. What does this mean? We know that our cells emit light and that this light is constantly sending and receiving information. We also know that we have at least some ability to affect this light. If this is true, then we have access to the control center of our minds and bodies. And if we have access and influence, then we have the ability to change ourselves at the most fundamental level by enhancing our light. So these biophotons are scientific evidence that we're truly composed of light. That by allowing ourselves to envision that light, we can strengthen it. By using our power of imagination, we can affect our physical world. When we meditate on the light, we may envision it as an outer light, but as both of our readings are telling us, that external light, that source energy, it's not actually external. It's something that's inside of us. So how do we honor our divine light and step into being a true light worker? Especially when we're struggling with a chaotic world of change that's all around us right now. So I'm going to share some ideas with you, but before I get there, I want to step into one more space. Both of the first readings spoke to the Christ consciousness, a term that again most of us recognize. Christ, that avatar that came to earth, bearing a message for all humanity about resurrecting our own divinity. And I think that it's worthwhile for us to remember that Jesus, as a man, struggled just like we do. The Christian Bible tells us that. He experienced anger when he cleansed the temple of the money changers. He experienced temptation to change his path and take the easier way when he spent 40 days and 40 nights in the desert wrestling with his own internal Lucifer. He experienced despair as he hung on the cross and called out to God, "Why have you forsaken me?" Now, I point this out because I think that it's important for us to remember that we're human and that there are going to be times when, just like Jesus did, we will struggle with anger. struggle with the temptation to give in to our internal demons, or struggle with despair when we just feel like we're suffering and nobody hears us. So when we slip or have moments that we are less than proud of, it's okay to dust ourselves off and try again. So here are 6 tips I have for you for finding and feeding that internal light. So first, take advantage of the natural light. I have cats. Be like a cat. You know how they curl up in the light? Absorb it when you can this time of year by basking in it whenever possible. And when it's not possible, artificial light will work. I have an obnoxious lamp that I hated turning on in my living room because it was so bright. But I moved it into my meditation room and found that on days when I'm feeling a little dark, that obnoxious light actually adds juice to my meditation. Dr. Dispenza's article on biophotons talks about the fact that our DNA will actually absorb and store light. And then when all else fails, visualize the light like we talked about in guided meditations. Number 2, change your perspective. Now I'm going to do that. So instead of whining this year about how early it gets dark this time of year, I'm going to start celebrating the fact that my mornings are lighter. If you feel surrounded by negativity, try turning off the news and finding inspirational people to follow on social media. And like our second reading told us, once you shift your perspective, everything changes. Number 3, recognize and strengthen your inner light by allowing time for meditation, prayer, self-reflection. We talk about it all the time, right? Meditation and prayer are both very powerful tools. Our first reading from the work of Franz Hartmann speaks to spirit being the air, the breath that fans or fuels the flames of our inner light. And as Diana mentioned, we're in the midst of our prayer toolbox series at ISD Oneonta. And in the class that I gave for that series, I talked about meditation being the pathway to prayer. Meditation is about finding the sacredness of our breath. The breath is spirit while we're in these bodies and can help us commune in prayer more strongly. And prayer itself allows us to ask for that inner strength, for that light, or to be able to send it to others when they need it. Again, increasing our own light. Now, self-reflection, that goes hand in hand with meditation and prayer. Recognize that we're all evolving and stay open to that evolution in your own personal beliefs and perspectives. Revisit them regularly. What you believed yesterday may not be the same as you believe today. And self-reflection allows you to stay open to that evolutionary process. Where am I now? And what does it mean for my journey? Number 4, try to step away from judgment. Just as your own beliefs and perspectives continue to evolve with self-reflection, allow that for others. I recently shared a Facebook quote that was very meaningful to me, and it said, "Stop expecting you from others." Recognize the fact that each and every person has a unique view on the world, and that view may not always match yours. Doesn't necessarily make them wrong and you right, or even the other way around. It's just really difficult to judge the steps of another when we're not in their shoes. Next, step into compassion. Science tells us that every living being is composed of light. So honoring that light, even in those we don't agree with, or who may not have found their way to fueling their own divinity yet. Remember, everyone is loved and is love. Everyone is someone's mother, father, son, daughter, sister, brother, friend. Regardless of how shrouded their light may appear to us, it's there. And remember to share that compassion with yourself also. As I mentioned previously, there are times when we all struggle. So when you don't react to something exactly the way you feel that you should have, try to remember to tell yourself, I'm human. And when I don't react as I wish to, it's an opportunity to review what I didn't like about that reaction and try to work towards a different one in the future. And my last tip, what to me may be the most important one I can share with you. Find your joy. That's where your light is. It's not always easy to find that joy. In a homily I gave a while ago, I talked about the fact that happiness and joy are two different things. Happiness is fleeting and activated by something outside. Joy is internal and a space that we can reside in. It's something that resonates from within. But just like in that study from Dr. Dispenza, he quoted about visualizing light enabling us to actually activate our own cellular light. So by imagining that light, we can activate our own cellular light. Happiness can help activate that space of joy. I used an example in my development circle last week. When I first wake up in the morning, I take a very long, leisurely stretch. And that first stretch of the day just always makes me happy. It feels so good. But I can't hold it for more than a minute or so. If I did, my muscles would get stiff and sore, and it would no longer serve its initial purpose. Plus, I usually have to get up to pee. But that first stretch of the morning, while I'm still cozy under the covers, that first stretch sets the tone for the day and makes it easier for me to move into a space of joy. So take the time to do the things that make you happy, make you feel good, because those things will help you discover your own inner joy and truly fuel your inner light. So as we continue on this journey, remember, no matter how dark the outside world may seem, it's truly more like the end of daylight saving time. The darkness is just being highlighted, but there's still just as much light in the world. All of us who make up the world are composed of light. You are the light. Allow yourself to be a light worker by finding and feeding that internal flame that's inside us all, because that's how we dispel the darkness and step forward into a bright future. Thank you. You're on mute, Diana.
One more time. Hmm? Thank you, Renee. That was beautiful. Yeah, just beautiful, Renee. As we turn to the prosperity portion of the
Okay.
service, let's start with a prayer of thanksgiving.